Entry 21. The spell I hid in the garden. I buried the jar in late spring. Foxglove had just started blooming, and the soil was still damp from the night storms. I didn't tell anyone what I put in it. Not then, not even now, not all of it. Because some spells aren't for power, or healing, or love. Some are for containment, and what I buried that day needed to be sealed, not released. It started after Entry 19, after the grimoire. Something in me had changed. My magic was stronger, but unsteady. The visions didn't stop when I asked. My fingertips would burn after casting. Birds stopped coming to the garden altogether. And I felt watched, even in my own home. So I wrote a spell I'd never read in a book. A binding of fire, meant not to hurt, but to hold. To seal something inside me until I was ready. I called it the Ember Lock. It had 3 parts. 1. Ash from a burnt poppet. 2. Blood from my left ring finger. 3. A mirror shard from the cupboard downstairs. Yes, from that mirror. I whispered a name, not mine, but one that had been whispered to me in sleep. I tied it with red thread, and I buried it beneath the rosemary bush, where Foxglove bloomed, where no one would touch it but me. At first it worked. I felt lighter. No more pressure in my chest, no more eyes behind my back. Even the birds came back. A robin sat on the trellis 2 mornings in a row. That hadn't happened since the incident with the book. My magic settled. It didn't vanish, it focused. I could cast without backlash. I could sleep without messages, but containment always has a cost. 2 weeks later, the rosemary began to blacken. Not from rot, not from weather. It charred from the inside out. When I cut a stem, it crumbled like burned paper between my fingers. And the foxglove, which had bloomed so brightly, wilted overnight. Without touch. The soil had gone sour. I tasted it. It had the tang of copper and ash. I knew then the spell hadn't just locked the energy. It had rooted itself into the land. That's the mistake witches make when hiding spells in gardens. We forget that the earth absorbs what we bury and grows it. The rosemary hadn't just guarded the jar. It had tried to contain it, and in doing so, became part of the working. Symptoms I noticed in myself. Pain in my left hand, the same finger I'd bled. Vivid dreams of being underground. A flicker in my eye every time I walked near the bush. And a strange resistance, almost fear, whenever I reached for fresh herbs. The garden had changed. It remembered what I did. I tried to leave it. Let it fade. Tend other corners. But something in me knew. If I didn't unearth the jar before midsummer, it wouldn't stay buried, and neither would what I'd locked inside it. I waited until just before dusk. Not because I thought it was safer, but because something about the light felt honest then, like the garden wouldn't lie. To me in that hour, the rosemary was nearly dead by then. The foxglove long gone. I wore gloves, salted my hands, whispered a charm for steadiness. Then I dug. The soil was tight, too tight. It shouldn't have been. We'd had rain for days, but the ground resisted me, like it knew. Still, I kept going. A few inches in, I hit the jar, and that's when I heard it. A hum, low, not in the air, in my ribs, like something was pushing sound through me. The same frequency I'd felt when touching that cursed mirror. The same pitch I'd felt in my teeth after that fire spell weeks before. I unearthed the jar fully, held it in my gloved hands. The red thread was darker now, not dusty, not wet. Burnt. But the jar itself wasn't scorched. Inside, the ash had turned into something else. No longer dry. It floated, suspended in a red haze. Thicker than smoke. Alive like blood. The mirror shard pulsed once, not light, but heat. Then it cracked. Not shattered, cracked, as if something inside had pushed from within. That was my warning. I knew better than to open it. Not without protection. So I built a ring of stones, lit 2 white candles, carved sigils into the dirt with a blackthorn stick, and whispered, "This working was mine. It no longer serves. By soil and salt, by root and flame, let it return to stillness." I didn't bury it again. Instead, I burned it. The glass turned white hot and then blackened. The ash scattered. The thread vanished in seconds. But the mirror shard didn't burn. I placed it in a separate jar with salt, sealed it with wax, and stored it in the darkest corner of the shed, warded, labeled, and never touched again. What you should know if you ever bury a spell? Earth remembers. Never assume what you hide stays hidden. Use biodegradable containers if the spell is meant to fade. Leave offerings for the land if the working is personal or painful. Herbs, seeds, or your own song. Never bury a spell of fire beneath living roots unless you want that flame to spread.